makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
A couple of months ago, when the Cuban protests were going on, I made a video which included a snippet of a video from Pitbull, you know, the reggaeton singer, whatever the hell he sings. I hate his music. I hate him. And it was incredibly cringe. It was his video in Spanish supporting the Cuban protesters, and yeah, it was very cringe. And when I saw that video, it hit me that he probably has some very right-wing views, which is not really surprising given that he is Cuban American, and Cuban Americans tend to be quite right-wing, tend to vote Republican all the time. They usually come from families who left Cuba after the revolution, were probably quite well off. They may have been landowners, business owners, I don't know. So they have no love for the Cuban regime, and they hate absolutely everything that is, you know, not just communism, but anything that is leftism. So another video came out, and this was from PragerU, who clearly loves Pitbull. I'm not sure they love his music, but they clearly love him. So let's watch this, and let's watch the commentary, which is from a Guatemalan libertarian called Gloria Álvarez, which I think I had covered before, but I realized that it may have been before I actually publicized my channel. And so a lot of the videos that I made before that, in the month before that, I took down because they were just basically like practice videos. But I'm 100% sure that I have done something with Gloria Álvarez before. So let's watch. She's like the Latin American Ann Coulter. So
whoever the doesn't like the United States of America, may God bless you, but you at the same time. If you don't like the United States of America, go back to the countries that we the from, and you'll see how much you appreciate the United States of America.
So that is the classic right-wing line whenever someone criticizes immigration policy or minority rights or whatever, especially if the person doing the criticism is a minority. Their response is always, you know, go back to your shithole country. That's the argument. And it's people who just cannot offer a structural critique of their own country because they always place it in the context of, admittedly more poorer countries. Countries where it's more difficult to make it in life, and there are plenty. But I think the U.S. should not be comparing itself to the Guatemalas of the world. The United States should be comparing themselves to the Denmarks and the Norways of the world, and Americans should be asking why on earth we don't have what they do. Because I'm sorry, having a shiny new aircraft carrier every couple of years does not make up for the fact that you don't have fucking healthcare. But anyway. Let's hear what Gloria has to say about this.
I have a question for you. Why do you support the same policies in the US that cause you to flee your home country?
I'm talking to you, Bernie Sanders supporters.
The policies I'm talking about are those that lead to a bigger and bigger central government. You know only too well that the more power the government has, the more corrupt it becomes.
Okay, so first thing to note is in Latin America, and I've said this before in other videos, the whiter you are, probably the better off you are in that society. Okay, and let's look at Gloria Álvarez. Guatemala is a country with approximately 50% of its population are indigenous, and look at Gloria Álvarez. So she is definitely not. She's definitely not someone who grew up in the highlands of Guatemala. Okay, she probably comes from a pretty well-off family in the capital or some other large city, I don't know. She probably went to very good private schools, maybe was educated abroad. In fact, I have her Wikipedia page. So yeah, she is a libertarian political commentator, born in Guatemala City. Oh, yeah. Her mother is of Hungarian origins, and her Cuban father is a marketer. So, yeah, studied from post-grad from Georgetown, some other studies elsewhere. So she's done, yeah, you need money to well, you need something to be able to have access to this kind of education. So what else? Oh, she ran for president in 2019, but she was her application was rejected. She was 32 years old when the minimum is 40. And here's where like you realize just how right-wing libertarians really are. During an interview in which Alvarez was asked on the Guatemalan genocide, she replied, "I wouldn't categorize what happened in Guatemala as a genocide. Actually, there's an industry of victimization that benefits from recreating the conflict, and because of that, we never forgive." So, great. So much for libertarians caring about life. As long as it's indigenous people being killed, they are perfectly fine with it. And let's look at her Twitter profile, because she's quite a character. So this is hilarious. Like, all the Mexican right-wingers follow her. These are all Mexican right-wingers. Yeah, she's retweeting this guy is like super far right Mexican guy. I made a video of him in Spanish, by the way. Wow. Anyway, look at her books. This is when I saw this, it immediately reminded me of Ann Coulter, because she wrote a book called How to Talk to a Liberal. She always had this was like Bush era conservative fantasies where liberals were basically like children that you had to dumb yourself down to speak to. And she's kind of doing the same. Like, this almost is practically the same book, like How to Speak with a Progressive. And you can tell that, you know, by the way, it's so much more condescending than her How to Speak with a Conservative, where it's like just the differences between liberalism and conservatism. By liberalism, I think she means libertarianism, obviously. But yeah, like, this is so much less condescending. You know, it has a chandelier and dressed like Thatcher, whereas this is just so patronizing. So you can tell that libertarians, when they have to choose between left and right, even though they claim to be socially progressive, remember they always argue, you know, fiscally conservative, socially progressive. That's kind of the, you know, summarize libertarianism in one line. But the economic argument always wins out, always, which is why they always vote right wing. You will rarely see a libertarian voting left wing. And her other book is also pretty funny. So it's The Populist Myth. And it's funny because it just lumps every single Latin American leftist in the same corner, as if Fidel and Lula had anything in common. Especially like Lula, and this is Michelle Bachelet from Chile. Like, they're pretty, you know, when they govern, they're pretty center left. There was nothing really radical. They're radical by the standards of Latin America, because Latin America is like structurally super right wing. But they basically governed as center leftist, leaning towards social democrats. So nothing too radical there. And even like putting Evo Morales, I mean, Evo definitely, a lot of these, the Latin American leaders in Latin America have a tendency to want to re-elect themselves, but you know, people like Evo won legitimately their elections. In fact, the only time there has been electoral fraud in Bolivia was actually the time that it was against Evo, and there was a fucking coup to remove him. So, you know, Angela Merkel, no one says that she's a dictator because she was there for 16 years. But you know, winning elections legitimately in Latin America, if you're a leftist, not good. You'll definitely have an Economist cover story smearing you. So yeah. Oh, and this guy Axel Kaiser, he's a Chilean, also a Chilean libertarian. He has quite a name, by the way. I think I saw his name in the wiki page here. Yeah, Axel Kaiser. His full name is Axel Philipp Kaiser Barents von Hohenhagen. Chilean guy. So, yeah, that is her. And the argument, this argument that more power is more corruption because you have bigger central governments, that's complete bullshit. And here is data on tax revenue from the OECD. As you can see, the countries that have less tax revenue as a share of GDP are actually the most corrupt ones. And tax revenue as a share of GDP tends to be a pretty damn good proxy of the size of the state. Not the only measure, obviously, but it's pretty good. If you had to pick one, that would be it. So look at Mexico, 16.5%. That's a pretty small state. Colombia, 19.7. Chile, 20.7. Look at the European countries. France, 45.4. Netherlands, almost 40. Norway, almost 40. Germany, almost 40. Sweden, 42.9. Are you honestly going to tell me that these, Mexico, Colombia, and Chile are, well, Chile is pretty, they have rule of law. But are you going to honestly argue that Colombia and Mexico are more efficient, more competitive, and less corrupt than Norway? You've got to be fucking kidding me. I mean, there's just no relation between those two things. But libertarians love to make that case, and it's a factually incorrect case. So anytime they tell you that the bigger the state, the more corruption, show them this chart.
Country, like most other nations in Central and South America, is very poor. 54% of the population lives in poverty, and 13% live in extreme poverty. Half of all children under 5 are chronically malnourished. Crippling government corruption is the norm. Opening a new business can take months, even years, because of a multitude of regulations that are designed to line the pockets of bureaucrats. So the cost is much too high for the average citizen.
So that has nothing to do with why there are so many poor people in Guatemala and why there are so many malnourished children. Let's be honest. How many of these poor Guatemalans have the capital to open a business? So then, regardless of the regulations that you have, that's not really the reason why they are poor. In fact, it's the absence of the state that is the most likely explanation of why they're poor, because they don't have any social safety net whatsoever, which essentially keeps them in poverty perpetually, generation after generation. Here is a chart of the tax. Remember, we're gonna estimate the size of the state based on tax to GDP ratios. Here is Guatemala at the very bottom. Guatemala literally has the lowest tax revenues of any country in Latin America. How on earth are you expected to fund or to obtain the necessary fiscal resources to get all those people out of poverty when you basically just have 13% of your GDP in taxes? That is ridiculously low. Ridiculously low. And compare, for example, with Costa Rica, 23.6. Costa Rica, by Latin American standards, is pretty affluent. They have universal healthcare. They have one of the best, most comprehensive education systems in Latin America. I've lived there. The standard of living in Costa Rica is better than Mexico's. I will admit that. Yeah. So now, can there be waste? Yes, of course. Like Brazil is notable for having a huge amount of tax revenues, and essentially, like their level of socioeconomic development is nowhere near as reflective of this number. In fact, Brazil on most socioeconomic indicators does worse than Mexico, with twice as many tax resources than we have. So it's not a guarantee that you will, that will translate into outcomes. However, what is definitely true is that without a state, you will not be able to do it. Okay? The state is not a guarantee that you'll be able to get all those people out of poverty. But absence of a state is a guarantee that you won't be able to do it. But of course, she does not mention that whatsoever. She also doesn't mention that there is also, why does this happen? Let's watch the video a bit more.
Quite simply, unless you're politically connected in Guatemala, you probably want to leave. And in the last 20 years, many Guatemalans have left, Or to put it more honestly, they fled. The fortunate ones reached the United States.
So, what she said there is actually true. The more politically connected you are, the less likely you will leave. And who is the most politically connected of all? And that is the economic elites. This is the same in all Latin American countries. Politics in Latin America serves economic elites. That is how the game is played. And let's look at the Guatemala's richest people. So these are the 4 Guatemalans who are among the 12, I think they mean billionaires of Central America. What do they have in common? What do these 4 people have in common? They're all white. Almost all the economic elites in Latin America are white. If you Google who are the richest Mexicans, the richest Brazilians, the richest Peruvians, regardless of how many, what the proportion of actual brown or black people those countries have, their economic elites will be white. So what does this create? This creates essentially a complete alienation between economic elites and the plight of the average person in that country. They don't care because they don't identify with these people. They're not racially the same. In fact, if they're indigenous, they don't even speak the same language, perhaps. So these people have more in common with each other. It's the same criticism that you hear of the global elite. They have more in common with each other. A rich American or rich Brit has more in common with a rich Malaysian than they do with a poor Brit or a poor American. It's kind of the same here. And yeah, so another thing that she doesn't mention is a lot of these people emigrate not just because of economic opportunities, but because of security issues. Guatemala is one of the most dangerous countries on earth, along with its neighbors, El Salvador and Honduras. And the reason is these countries have huge levels of urban crime, urban gangs called maras. And a lot of them basically stifle economic opportunity. If you want to open a business in Latin America, in any of these countries, you will probably have to pay a gang on a monthly basis. So imagine having to keep your business afloat while simultaneously paying a gang an X amount of your profits, and knowing that not doing so will mean that you will get killed or a family member will get killed. So that is also a reason why a lot of people have gone into these migrant caravans and left. They have had family members killed by the gangs. That's the situation. And she does not mention this at all. She does not mention it. And you know why? Because it's impossible to have the rule of law in a country and apply it so discretionally only against, say, the gangs and not against the politicians. You can't have that. And so Latin American countries, and by this I mean all of them, except with the tiny exception of ones like Chile and Uruguay that do have kind of Western levels of rule of law. But all the other ones which don't, they have to make a choice. They either have the rule of law and apply it mostly to everyone. I know they're never going to touch like the super, super rich, because even in countries like the US or Britain, they don't. Or they don't have rule of law. So everyone can do basically whatever they want. And most Latin Americans choose to not have the rule of law. It's deliberate. It's not because of lack of capacity. It's not because of lack of training or education. The reason Latin America does not have rule of law is because it doesn't want to have the rule of law. It wants to leave a significant amount of its population basically outside the scope of having any negative consequences for their actions. And that includes elites like these. So does she mention that? Of course she doesn't.
Corruption is the norm. Opening a new business can take months, even years, because of a multitude of regulations that are designed to line the pockets of bureaucrats. So the cost is much too high for the average citizen. Quite simply, unless you're politically connected in Guatemala, you probably want to leave. And in the last 20 years, many Guatemalans have left. Or to put it more honestly, they fled. The fortunate ones reached the United States, the freest and wealthiest nation in human history.
The United States is not the freest country by any stretch of the imagination. Of all the things that you have to worry about, like, you know, paying for healthcare, childcare, all that stuff, which in so many European countries is basically paid by your taxes and therefore free. No, Americans have no idea how unfree they are until they go live in Europe.
There are at least 1 million Guatemalans living in the US. Nearly every Mexican and Central and South American immigrant in the United States, whether they immigrated legally or illegally, moved or fled to the US for the same reasons: economic opportunity and the freedom to shape their own lives. In short,
the United States also has the one of the lowest social mobilities in the Western world. So I forget who said this, but something like you're more likely to find the American dream in Denmark than in America. So, you know, again, she is only comparing the United States versus poor countries like Guatemala, and that's not a fair comparison. And that's also what people like Pitbull are doing.
you came to the United States to participate in what Americans call the American dream. But have you ever asked yourself, why is the United States so free, so much less corrupt, and so much more affluent than any Latin American country? The answer lies first and foremost in the unique American belief in limited government. Why?
So all the volumes of books and PhD dissertations and journal articles about Latin American economic history, about the colonial power and economic structures, historical path dependencies, all that has just gone to hell. There's just one reason, and that's limited government. That's libertarianism. That's your brain on libertarianism. Just forget that all this evidence exists. Let's just find some like tiny axiomatic argument that I can give to own the libs. That's libertarianism. Just forget there's evidence. Forget any sort of empirical evidence.
Because the smaller the government, the less the corruption. And the smaller the government, the more individual freedom and personal.
So I prove this is not the case. Smaller governments can be hugely more corrupt than larger governments. If anything, large governments are often a reflection of a very efficient state. Are you going to argue that the Norwegian state is inefficient? No, these are governments which have decommodified large sectors of the economy, like healthcare, education, in some cases utilities, or at least part of utilities. Like a lot of services that are in the hands of the market in these countries are not part of the market, and often the outcome, the efficiency of these services, as well as the access to these services, is much higher than if the private sector delivered them. So I don't know. Again, where would you rather have healthcare? Norway or the United States? Germany or the United States?
Personal responsibility. And given those things, along with hard work and talent, you can accomplish your life's goals.
Lovely. Don't know what else to add other than Pitbull is full of shit, and Gloria Álvarez as well. I would love to debate her though. Maybe once my channel gets bigger, I will reach out and have a libertarian debate. But yeah, this is comedy. That's what it is. It's not economic analysis. It's not political punditry. This is pure comedy. So I hope you had a good laugh. And on that note, thanks for watching. Please like, please share. Most importantly, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.